When making a game, you use a game engine. But what if you wanted to do something more custom, like make a game from scratch? SDL. Is it a game engine? No. Is it a framework? No. It's a code library. You don't have to use it when making a game from scratch, but what do games do? Games need to draw to the screen, play audio, handle user input so you can interact with the game. All basic stuff you realize when playing a game, but the thing is, how Windows does those things is different than how Mac, or Linux, or PlayStation, or the Switch, and the Wii, and the Game Gear all handle those things. Remember Game Gear? That thing would eat 6 AA batteries and die in a 30-minute car ride. It couldn't even tenderize meat like the Game Boy.
Use them to tenderize meat.
But that is where SDL shines. You write the game code once using the tools SDL gives you, and under the hood it handles all of the platform-specific stuff for you, essentially making your game cross-platform. Now, if Sega used SDL, maybe the Game Gear could have tenderized meat like the Game Boy, and who knows how gaming history would have changed. You're still making your game from the ground floor, just using SDL is going to save you a lot of pain down the road. It's great. Or is it? See, I've never used SDL or made a game written in C, but that changes today. I'm gonna do both and see if I can get a game set up and published for you to play and see for myself what it's really like to work with SDL, and it's great timing because SDL3 just released. And to use it, it's as simple as just needing to install it. But turns out my distribution of Linux doesn't have a package of SDL3 yet, so no problem, no big deal. We'll just have to build it from source. This is what real programmers do anyway. It definitely didn't take me 5 hours because I found the documentation very confusing. But check it out, we can now import an SDL3 library right off the rip in our file here. We're ready to go. At least we would be if I knew how to do anything, but I don't. Fortunately, there is good documentation on how to use SDL3, including these example projects. Like, check this one out. We can just copy and paste this code, and now we get this window that changes colors, and it's beautiful. And what's nice about these example projects is you can just pick apart the source code and see how things are set up. If you've only ever worked with a game engine like Unity or something before, working at a lower level like this, you might find interesting. Some of the SDL specific stuff is like creating a window. On its own, this window sucks. It doesn't do anything. You can drag it around maybe, but there's nothing there until you assign it a renderer. And a renderer is just like a canvas. You tell it to draw stuff and it does, like textures. So we can give it this player texture to draw, and now your renderer that lives in a window is drawing your player texture. I mean, this is all very simple stuff. Nothing is revolutionary, right? But there are things you just take for granted that game engines do for you. For example, once we start moving this player texture around the screen, you'll notice that there's all these artifacts that get left behind. And to fix that, you have to explicitly tell the renderer to wipe itself clean at the end of every frame, and that way, when it draws the updated position of the player texture, it looks nice and smooth like this. Which again, is no big deal. This is really easy stuff once you learn it. You'll just find you have much more granular control of things down at this level as opposed to some game engines. Hey, remember that game I was gonna make? Well, I don't really know what the game's gonna be yet, but I know I wanna move this player around the screen with some input. The documentation had this example of Snake, and this basically showed how SDL can capture user input, which means you could basically copy that, and now my player can move around, which is always my favorite milestone. Pretty much every time I tried to make a change, since I'm learning C on the fly and learning SDL, I would stop and play around with a lot of stuff. So I took this chance to change the background color to cornflower blue. Real ones know what I'm talking about. And while moving the player is great, I wanted to practice some collision too. So the easiest thing I figured out how to do is to do some bounds checking to make sure the player can't leave the window. And now you'll just run alongside it, no matter how hard you try to escape. You're trapped, you can't leave. And he never will. He'll never escape, which is perfect because now we can throw stuff at the player and they can't get away, like this very slow moving red box. Also, it somehow removed the cornflower blue color I just added. I don't know how that happened, but I'm gonna fix it. But before I did, I made sure that the red block hits the player and then pauses the game. This led to an important realization. Do you know what's better than one red block? More than one red block. And you know what's even better than that? A wall of red blocks. And what's even better than that is many red blocks with walls of red blocks that show up in a randomly generated pattern. At least it should. You see this clip? I'm restarting the game over and over, and you might notice that the block spawns in the same spot every single time. And if you've watched my channel before, you know that computers are just like plants in that they both have seeds, and we needed to update the seed here so that every time we run the game, it's a different randomly generated pattern, which is very important because now you actually have the makings of a game where you try and survive for as long as possible, and it gives you a score when you die. So at this point, as much as I love this player character and the red boxes, it's time to give the game a bit of a facelift, improve the art a little bit. So I added this new player sprite, and I made these slime guys to be the enemies or the red boxes. And then I also gave like a checkered pattern on the background just to give it a little bit of intrigue. You know, the game's just looking a little bit more presentable now. I didn't like the tiny slimes though, so I made them bigger. You know, bigger is better, that's what they say. And in what might be the most important part of the game, and what adds a bit of spice, is I made this power up, and it will spawn every so often in the game. And every time you collect it, multiple things happen. 1, it makes the slimes go faster. 2, it randomly changes the slime's direction. So they can go north, south, east, west. They might turn right into you, you gotta be careful. And the last thing is that it also adds a score multiplier, so the more of these you collect, the higher your score is gonna increase over time. And with that, I think we have a core game loop that is like the bare minimum of what I can consider fun. And it is kind of fun, actually. And overall, everything's feeling really great. At least, I thought it was, until I ran the game and just kind of left it for a couple minutes. And when I came back, well, my computer was basically frozen to a standstill, which, when it comes to the C language, is a tale as old as time: memory leaks. My game had quite a few. And this is the downfall of not knowing how to use C and being a bad C developer. Because this was a big pain for me to figure out. And I'm not even 100% sure I fixed all of them. All I know is that it won't max out your computer if you just let it sit at the main menu for a couple minutes. We're ready to ship. I did a round of final polishing, like making the power-up spin, adding some sounds and music. And while it's easy enough to build the game to run on the computer, I want to actually host this in itch.io and be a browser game, which is easy to do if you use a tool called Emscripten. This will basically convert our game here into WebAssembly so it can be played in the browser. So after a couple hours of reading documentation and trying to build out a makefile, I eventually was able to produce a built version of my game through Emscripten that I could put into itch.io. The problem is the game would run, but the second you tried to play, it would crash and error out. And you guys, I spent like literally half a day trying to figure out this issue. It would just not work no matter what I did. And then after hours of peering over my code as to what could possibly be causing this WebAssembly error, I've just was like deleting random things and removed this function that wasn't even being used and did nothing, and then rebuilt it and put it back up and it worked. So that was frustrating. That was not the fun part of this whole experience, but the rest of it was pretty good. In fact, I'd probably say that it was a great experience overall. I have like 100 ideas for games I want to make using SDL going forward, and I already know how I would do it next time 10 times better probably. So if you want to try it, don't be scared. Go ahead and do it. Just don't make so many memory leaks like I did. You can find the game I made in this video, and you can play it in your browser, link in the description. If you want to see other games I've made or other ways to make games, make sure you subscribe, you're gonna miss it. And go ahead and watch this video because YouTube thinks you're gonna like it. Get out of here, go make games.